I am Chad Millman, Chief Content Officer of the Action Network. Joining me today, dude, this is such a big show. My co-host, my companion, my compadre, my BFF professional better, Simon Hunter. Hello, Simon.
Hello, Chad. What are we, 6, 7 weeks out from the start of the season, brother? We're almost there.
We are so close since we last spoke. Caleb Williams and Roma Dunze have officially signed their contracts with the Chicago Bears. That's all I'm saying. Next week, we begin our annual NFL division previews. And so we want to seize the moment today as training camps open across the NFL to bring on two of my favorite colleagues, could be Action Network's smartest people. They're going to discuss, Simon, I think you and I can agree, the luck rankings have revolutionized how we've looked at games the past couple of years. This is like, it's very infrequent that a new stat is created that has such a huge impact on how we look at the games and that is so accurate in terms of reflecting quality of play, quality of teams, separating signals from the noise in how we do our jobs. You know I love it. I know that you love it.
Yeah, they've taken something that stupid people like me just say, well, I'm buying low on a team and actually put some math behind it. So for years, I always talk about, me and Chad love buying low on teams that get embarrassed, especially in primetime games. And then here come a couple of geniuses that actually can put the data behind it. And even when we knew don't even see an edge, they come to us with these luck rankings. We go, okay, that's actually a pretty huge edge in that game. So yeah, we love it.
Welcome to the show, the engine of our predictive analytics team, two of the most respected people in the industry, Sean Kerner and Dr. Nick Giffen. Fellas.
Howdy.
What's going on?
It's been a long off season.
It has been a long offseason. I mean, you don't have an offseason.
No, I don't.
Dr. Nick.
I don't. With basketball and NASCAR and all
Because
that
true
stuff.
story, I was interviewing a candidate for a job. And this is always a really good indicator to me of whether or not someone knows our business. Because everyone always like, I'm so excited about Action Network, blah, 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 blah. And so I'll be like, tell me about how did you find Action Network? And so he started telling me that originally he was betting a lot of hockey and was trying to make hockey models, but then discovered the Action Network app and started to bet NASCAR. And he named, now I'll ask, like, tell me, who do you like to follow in the app? The first person he named, Dr. Nick Giffen, because of NASCAR. That's how you know somebody loves action. And of course, we immediately hired that person.
I like it.
Nick's a little low right now because he's injured. Otherwise,
Yes.
I feel like he'd be jumping out of his seat with the recognition. That's a big deal.
I don't know. It kind of, I don't know. I get a little embarrassed on the recognition sometimes.
I told you, my favorite Nick story is we're all in the office together, Chad, and I think we hit, it was like a 17-1 or 10-1 guy to score a touchdown, and we're all going crazy. We're all celebrating, and Nick is just right back on his computer looking for the next guy to bet live. I was just like, this guy is a machine. Truly, you are a machine, Nick.
You know what? Sean Kerner's not bad either.
Yeah, he's all right.
As a reminder, the Favorites podcast is presented by Bet365. Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boosts with them than with anyone else. Every day they put out the odds on hundreds of bets to give you a chance to win more. Bet365 boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays, and they don't stop there. Keep an eye out for their biggest and best odds with the incredible Super Boost. Check out the boost and see why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older and present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, restrictions apply. Don't forget, every episode of The Favorites live on YouTube. For those enjoying on YouTube, don't forget to give us a like and subscribe to the Action Network YouTube page. Very important programming note for those listening and those watching. We're excited to share that our popular college sports betting brand BBOC is launching its very own YouTube channel. Get every episode of the BBOC podcast, plus live shows and other exclusive content on the new BBOC channel starting this Thursday, July 25th. Whether you're into college football, college basketball, college baseball, any other college sports, our new BBOC is the channel for you. Check out the announcement this Thursday. Make sure to subscribe now so you don't miss any of the fun college football action this season. Kerner.
Yeah.
We love the luck rankings. I remember exactly where we were when the idea for the luck rankings was hatched. Explain to people what the luck rankings are, why you do all this work, why create these things.
Yeah, so, Simon actually hit the nail on the head when he was saying, we're looking for teams to buy low, sell high on. So I had been using a similar concept to the luck rankings years ago when I was trying to attack, season-long win totals. And, the idea is that a team's record, is a factual thing, but it can be misleading because there's a ton of other factors at play, a lot of which are due to luck. So I was just looking at more high-level things like a team's one-score records, strength of schedule, injury luck, opponent field goal luck, and other factors. So the idea was just to get a sense of which teams are probably over or underachieving, and look to, buy or sell the upcoming season. During the season, I would kind of play around with it and, kind of use that for my spread bets. But, eventually I realized, this is probably a really good idea that can be like formalized and used in season. And, what better person, the genius that is Nick Giffen, to come up with the formalized version of this. But that was kind of the overall idea of it. And I was just, rubbing two sticks together. And then Nick, invented sort of the convention oven of like just making it work. But that was kind of the idea behind it. Kind of because we all have our own perceptions of teams and stuff, which can be skewed. So it's just a way to kind of look at the underlying data, underlying luck factors, and kind of, really gauge which teams we should be betting on or fading.
Kerner, you set up Nick so nicely, and I know he's super shy and doesn't like the attention. But Nick, please explain the actual mechanics. What are we talking about here? What do they quantify? How did you test these?
Yeah, so obviously Sean approached me about this, and I, have I basically got my start in sports analytics with college basketball. And Ken Pomeroy has a luck column on his his homepage there. And I've always been super interested in, like the sabermetrics behind sports, whether it's baseball or basketball or anything like that. And so there's something called Pythagorean expectation or Pythagorean wins. And very often that's used as a way of, saying which teams were lucky or which teams were unlucky, which is based off of your points scored and your points allowed. However, points scored and points allowed can be a little misleading, which is where we get to the idea of the luck rankings. So instead of doing points scored and points allowed and just, taking that expectation, I went another level with it. And there's actually multiple levels you can go. And there's something called second order Pythagorean wins or third order Pythagorean wins. And second order is basically saying instead of using your point differential, we'll use your expected point differential, right? Because if you get a lot of 99-yard touchdowns, that's not sustainable. But that shows up in your point differential, but it wouldn't really be your expected point differential. So that's kind of the idea. But instead of just using scoring plays or luck-based plays, right? Like maybe if you're on defense and the opposing team drops a wide open pass, yeah, that's lucky, or fumble luck, those kinds of things. Instead of just using those purely luck-based plays, I use every single play in the whole game. And I say, okay, it's 1st and 10 from the 25-yard line. What does this team do against the opposing team on 1st and 10 from the 25-yard line if we replayed this a million times? And then what happened on this specific play? Did that come over or under the average expectation if we replayed that situation a million times? And the nice thing is it adjusts for the team's strength, right? So we're talking about if it's the Eagles versus the New York Giants or something like that, and the Eagles offense and the Giants defense, we're expecting the Eagles to have a better baseline than if it was the New York Giants offense versus the 49ers defense or something like that. So it adjusts relative to each team's strength as well. So it's not just saying the average NFL play, saying the average NFL play based off these teams' strengths. And that automatically injury adjusts, because if you have one of your best players injured, the expectation changes as well. So it really is a true measure of team luck, and it takes every single play from the whole NFL season and then produces an expected score. How many points should this team have scored in the game, and how many points should they have allowed in this game? And, like I said, a lot of things go into it. Every single play, team strengths, play volume, field position, all that stuff goes into it, and we get an expected score. And from there, we can derive an expected win or loss percentage, compare that to a team's actual win and loss, and then we can get what we call our luck percentage.
Simon, I know you want to jump in. Let me just ask Nick to do one thing. Explain to people why you're called Dr. Nick, because I think it's worthwhile for them to understand the baseline from which you come to be able to do this kind of math.
Yeah. So I have a background in mathematics. Both of my parents were mathematics teachers at University of Virginia. And so naturally I fell into a math background as well. I got my undergrad in mathematics, but then I also got my PhD in mathematics, which is why I am a doctor of mathematics. So that's why you call me Dr. Nick.
And I'm sure Nick got sick of it. Me and Chad couldn't. Anytime we lose a bet, I feel like every time, Chad, we're texting Dr. Nick here and being like, "Hey, we're on the right side, right? The math didn't work out for us, but mathematically, were we on the right side?" And Nick's just nice. He's like, "Yeah, you guys probably had a 70% chance of covering that game where you really shouldn't." And yeah, that's why we love throwing in. We talk about it all the time. It's probability, all the math behind this. I mean, it's just so heavy. And people get annoyed about it. They're like, you guys talk about the numbers so much and trust in your system. It's like, you can't always go against the numbers, right? There's times here, me and Chad talk on the show. We like a side. If these guys are on the other side of their luck rankings and a couple other stuff, the trends on the other side of it, me and Chad will walk away from those bets, right? And more often than not, it's worked out from us. So I know it sounds crazy to people, but there's a rhythm behind this. So just to follow up on it, Nick, there's a difference, right, between what you guys are doing here in DVOA, correct?
Absolutely. And, that was one of the things I like to talk about. So DVOA measures, and it's a great metric. I love DVOA. We use it all the time, but it measures what happened on the field.
It's the good lazy
right?
man's numbers, right?
Yeah, good. There's a lot of high level math that goes into that as well, but it measures what happened on the field. So it doesn't measure luck. It is saying this is what happened. And if you're the luckiest team in the world and every bounce went your way and every 99-yard play was a touchdown, it would say you're the greatest team in the history of the world, but you'd be expected to regress. And it doesn't tell you that, right? So it's a wonderful metric. It tells you how teams have performed, but it doesn't tell you how teams are probably going to perform going forward. And I think that's one of the nice things about the luck rankings is it's forward looking. You mentioned, Simon, buying high or buying low, or selling high on a team. Well, you can buy low in a couple different ways. If a team wins, barely wins, you wouldn't really consider that a buy low. But what if they should have won by 20, right? And they won by 1 point? That's a way to buy low on a team. And people don't often see that way. And I think that's something that's really cool about the luck rankings is we now have a way to see that. We have a way to see we can buy low, even if the team is 3-0, maybe they're 3-0 and they should be 3-0 with a plus 50 point differential instead of 3-0 with a plus 5 point differential or something like that, just based off the way the bounces have gone. And conversely, there could be an 0-3 team that we actually don't want to buy low on because they should be 0-3, right? So this is now a way for us to really see how teams are doing compared to their record or compared to their point differentials, versus what they actually should be.
So Simon is right. I would say over the past 2 years, since we launched the luck rankings, the number of times we have both liked the side that we thought was against the numbers, that years past, we definitely would have bet that game. Since the luck rankings, we'll look at it and like by Thursday when the luck rankings have come out and like this game would have been one of our top 5 games, we'll be like, ah, fuck. The luck rankings don't like it. And like it changes. It makes us so upset. Sean,
Yeah.
last year's unluckiest teams
Mhm.
and describe sort of the teams and then how you're defining the percentage in like how you're using percentages to define the luck and unluck.
Yeah, so let's just talk the, 3 unluckiest teams, and I guess it's kind of ironic. They're all from the NFC South, which is pretty interesting. But the unluckiest team from last season was the Carolina Panthers. They only won 2 games, but they were expected to win around 4.5, which I believe is their current win total right now. But they were arguably the worst team in the league and had quite a bit of bad luck. So I think it's fair for us to be down on them, but I think just due to a lot of the underlying factors we've discussed, maybe they weren't as bad as we thought. They went 2-6 in one-score games, and the thing with one-score games is you would expect most teams to be around 500. When a game falls within one score, it's kind of lucky when you win versus if you were to blow a team out of the water and win by 10 plus, it's less luck in that case. So they were on 2 wins fewer just looking at their one score record. Plus opponents made 96% of their field goals against them. That's something that's kind of outside of their control and probably contributed to them losing so many close games. They were third worst in injury luck, which is kind of outside of the luck rankings. But when it comes to looking at their 2024 outlook, this is a team that checks all the boxes of a team that I think we should probably buy low on. I think they're going, oh, you're shaking your head already. Uh-oh.
No, it's just
But
because I can't believe you're doing this to us. We bet the Carolina Panthers so often last year. So many
who's
times.
who's we? Oh, you got
Me and
To end
Simon.
this, to end the
Yeah.
season though, to end the season, Chad
Yeah.
should say this is towards the end of the
To end,
season.
towards the end of the
Right.
season, like we were on them constantly because A, because of the luck rankings, but B, like at that point in the year, they were so undervalued.
Yeah, we were
and
getting like 3 to 2
everybody,
points every week.
yeah. And so
was
like
brutal.
we were constantly betting them and constantly losing on the
Oh,
Panthers.
don't I know it?
In like the worst, ugliest fashion you can even imagine, though. It's
Oh my
like
God.
every time it was pure heartbreak.
But that's
we've
the
already
thing is
joked.
like, when teams are unlucky and we bet on them, there's still only a, I wouldn't say 50-50 chance, but like they're undervalued in the market, but there's still a
Yeah.
chance they don't improve, right?
Oh, yeah,
We
yeah.
expect regression, but it doesn't always happen. So that's the whole point. Like we haven't even talked about the record of the luck rankings, but the luck rankings hit it over a 60% rate over a long,
dude,
big sample
gonna-
size.
We're going to get there. That is the
Okay, all right.
that is the kicker. That's
Yeah.
what's going to keep people sticking around is you talking about the thresholds and the win percentages
Mhm.
against the spread for the luck rankings. We've already talked about how the Panthers are going to be a team. Simon and I have said this, that we're practically on every week, and we can't believe we're going to ask our listeners to do that again. So
Well, they have the most expensive line in football now, Chad. So I'm hoping that's
Yeah.
going to ease people's pain. I'm like, hey, there's some logic behind this Panthers love this year.
So now we know why Kerner
Absolutely.
is wearing the Panthers hat.
Yep. Sign me up for
Uh,
that. Yeah.
Who else? Who else is the
Uh,
bottom of the list? You mentioned 3
well,
NFC South teams.
Yeah, so the second unluckiest were the New Orleans Saints. They did win 9 games, but their expected win total was closer to 11.5. Similar situation where they were 3-6 in one-score games. So a bit of, unluckiness there, but they had a plus 75 point differential. And just for reference, the Chiefs had a plus 77 point differential. They finished with 11 wins. The Lions had a plus 66 point differential. They had 12 wins. So, the Saints played much better than their record. Now, having said that, they did have the 7th best injury luck and they had the easiest schedule. So I'm not saying that we can necessarily bank on them to have more wins this year. So out of the 3 teams from the NFC South that were the unluckiest teams, they're probably the least likely team for me personally to back their over, because we can't bet on the over on everybody in the NFC South. So they're a team where they were certainly unlucky, but they don't really check the boxes for me of 2024 bounce back or success or an improvement in win total. I think it was just based on last year, they played much better than their 9-win record indicated. But again, there were other factors around that outside of luck.
Chad, I'm a Derek Carr truther. I'll just say this really quick. From week 11 to week 18, number 2 quarterback in Pro Football Focus, Derek Carr. So I know it's not saying much because Derek Carr, they didn't really win that many games in stretch, but he didn't play as bad as people perceive last year. Once he got comfortable in the offense, that's kind of my whole point with them. Just going to this year, people should know bookmakers say right now they're the least bet team in the futures market, and win total, Super Bowl, divisional odds. No one believes in the Saints in this upcoming season.
Well, you know what the problem is, and this is something that's interesting about the luck rankings that I don't want to go too deeply in now because I want to give full context, but we don't like the Saints because we think Dennis Allen is a terrible coach. And what Sean is saying, to me, supports the idea that their luck is partially driven by really bad strategy and decision making.
That's fair.
And not putting them in a position to succeed and to have any luck. So to me, the Panthers makes more sense, whereas the Saints, it makes sense that their luck ranking is so low because Dennis Allen is just not very good at his job. Sean, who else?
So the third unluckiest team, again, sticking with the NFC South, is the Atlanta Falcons. They ended up only winning 7 games, but they were expected to win around 8.5, which wasn't any good for my over 8.5 win total ticket for them last year. So I guess this is one of those situations where Nick would agree that, maybe I was a bit unlucky backing their over last year. But they're a team where there were certainly a ton of signals of bad luck. 4-6 record, 1-score games. Opponents made 95% of field goals against them. So similar thing where, a lot of those close games maybe was driven by bad field goal luck. I think it's safe to say that one of the drivers of the Falcons' 7-win season was just poor quarterback play. Desmond Ridder was certifiably bad. And if you recall, the first time I actually walked the plank betting on the Panthers wasn't until week 15 when they played the Falcons, and I watched that entire game. It was awful. And I would say Desmond Ridder literally lost that game. Like if they had any other quarterback, they win that game. So looking ahead to 2024, they are absolutely correcting that by bringing in a veteran like Kirk Cousins. They have all the pieces there, but just bring in, a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, and that can just really boost the incoming regression anyway. So that's why I do like them. But they did make the bizarre move, in terms of short-term prospects by drafting Michael Penix in the top 10. But you could argue that they have one of the potentially better backup quarterbacks, which can, raise their team's floor or whatnot. But they're a team similar to the Panthers where I'm definitely interested in investing 2024. I think they check all the boxes of a team that, will bounce back. And I know that the market's probably higher on them than the Panthers, but they're one of those teams that I think they definitely have a lot of signals of bouncing back and exceeding expectations this season.
Yeah, they're fascinating to me, and our listeners know we're an Atlanta Falcons podcast. We cannot quit the Atlanta Falcons, and I feel badly for Arthur Smith. I think the guy kind of got shafted. They didn't give him any players to really run that offense, and so how can he be blamed for not being able to utilize Bijan or Kyle Pitts or even Drake London to the extent that he's able to? When you got nobody who can throw the ball and is constantly losing you games. Simon, we're going to be betting a lot of the most irrelevant division in all of football this year.
We'll see, because I as much as I do like what Atlanta's done offensively, they lost their DC, who I love. I mean, obviously their head coach, his specialty is defense, but that's a big deal to me. And their D line, Chad, I got them to grade as my 3rd worst D line heading into the season. So yeah, they might be one of the easiest teams to run the ball against this upcoming season. I mean, I think their top 2 pass rushers left. So it is a big deal. Like, it is a big deal. Atlanta's defense might be bad, but again, if we're talking fantasy and offense, that's even better if you like the Atlanta offense. So, Nick, give it to us, man. Who is the 2023 luckiest teams. We just went from the worst to were the luckiest. I already know one off the top of my head. Let's break it all down.
Real quick, if you all remember, not last year, but the year before, who was one of the luckiest teams? That was the Kirk Cousins-led Minnesota Vikings.
That's
And
right.
now he's with Atlanta. So, and you guys mentioned coaching. I think there could be a little bit to the style of quarterback play that also can lend itself to being higher or lower in the luck rankings. We'll talk about that. But the luckiest team from last year was the Pittsburgh Steelers. They topped our luck rankings almost weekly last year. Not every week, but a lot of the weeks they were the luckiest team. If we look prior to week 18, right? Because in week 18 they played the Baltimore Ravens without Lamar Jackson. But prior to week 18, the Steelers had a minus 27 point differential. It was even lower in expected point differential. And the Steelers went overall last year 9-2 in one score games. 9-2.
Crazy.
That's crazy. That's completely unsustainable. And another thing that was unsustainable was the way they scored. And this is part of why they were so lucky when I talk about all those 99-yard touchdowns. I wasn't exaggerating almost with the Steelers because they had the fourth highest touchdown rate off of explosive plays. If you look at all their touchdowns and then take the ones that were from explosive plays, they had the fourth highest rate of that. But they had the highest rate of touchdowns that came from 60-plus yard plays. Number one in the NFL. And that's crazy because as far as their overall explosive play rate, they were just a mid-pack team. So that's way above their expectation. That's something you would absolutely expect to regress and a completely unsustainable way of scoring. And I remember through the first 6 or 7 weeks of the season, they only had one normal touchdown. Everything else was either a defensive touchdown, a 60-plus yard touchdown, or a 50-plus yard field goal. I mean, you can't sustain winning that way.
Well, especially this was a team who all season, the knock was on how bad their offense was. Just dreadful. So that stat, which I didn't even know, is so reflective of luck and opportunity that comes in a flash that you cannot count on. And it's the exact reflection of a team like the Steelers being lucky.
Yeah, exactly. And, I mentioned they
got freaking brilliant. Oh my God.
They got a backup quarterback in the last week of the regular season. Well, of their 6 divisional games, 4 of them came against backup quarterbacks. Now, that's not particularly lucky in terms of the luck rankings because it adjusts for that, right? You're playing a worse quarterback or something like that. That's already accounted for. But that's just something else that kind of inflates their record compared to what it could have been, So it's something to consider when we're talking about maybe potential future win totals. So the Pittsburgh Steelers, the luckiest team in the NFL last year. Simon knows where I'm going to go with the next one.
Yeah, I was going to say, pretty shocking, Chad. This is be my 12th or 13th year as a career professional bettor. And this is the first time I've ever had a summer of talking to pros, taking the under on Pittsburgh. Wait till we get into later in the season. Their schedule, Chad, brutal this upcoming year.
Yeah.
And Nick just touched on it. They had so much injury luck last year in their division that Joe Burrow was down. They caught Lamar with a back when the Ravens had a backup. And even if you remember that game against the Ravens, they're losing the entire game. I think there was a turnover or a pick or something like that. All of a sudden, they're up 17-10 with 2 minutes to go against the Ravens. It's just things always bounce their way. And I think the pros are finally going against them this upcoming season, Chad.
Nick, who was number 2?
Number 2, let's stay in the state of Pennsylvania and go to Simon Hunter's Philadelphia Eagles. And I mean, Simon knows they were definitely a lucky team last year. Started 10-1, ended 11-6, losing 5 of the last 6
You predicted
games.
it too. You said it you and Sean were both saying it for about 3-4 weeks. We're they're going to go off a cliff here. Eventually, they're going to go off the cliff. And boy, did me and Chad ride them going off that cliff. We needed it to finish above 500.
And
yeah,
do you remember when
when
they started going off the cliff? It was when we were
Buffalo
all together.
Yeah,
when we were all together for
the
49ers Eagles game.
They went off the cliff that 49ers Eagles game, and we were all on the Niners. But it was the week before they had an overtime game late against the Bills. And that, to me, and Simon and I did our show that night, that was the beginning of the end. They were getting beat up. They were exhausted. It's also when you could see their defensive line starting to crater. Like that's when we lost our rookie of the year bet with, was it Jordan Davis? Like, was he
Carter.
the one?
Carter,
Right.
Jalen Carter.
Right. So, you're so right. That was the beginning of the end.
But that's the greater point about the luck rankings is like these guys saw through all the bullshit and they were like telling you for weeks, this team isn't as good as people perceive. The public is overrating this team. And that's, again, we're trying to hammer home here is that the luck rankings look at it differently than you and I could ever look at it.
Well, I do want to talk a little bit about Nick. I want you to give your third team before I ask my follow-up question.
Sure. So the third team, and there's kind of a third and a fourth team, but we'll just stick with the Indianapolis Colts as the third team. They were 6-3 in one-score games. They were 2-1 in overtime games. So definitely some close game luck. If we exclude Week 18, because Week 18 always has the weird stuff going on with players being rested, et cetera, motivations. Through Week 17, Indianapolis had a minus 15 point differential, but they were 9-7. You'd expect them to be more like 7-9. So they're kind of 2 wins above expectation. And their expected point differential, they had a minus 15, but their expected was minus 45. And a lot of that just comes from, it was little things. It was a lot of little things. They were 22nd in offensive success rate through Week 17 and only 21st in defensive success rate. So bottom half, almost bottom 10 in both offensive and defensive success rates through Week 17, yet they were 9-7. That's just not a sustainable formula for a winning team. They also had the third most defensive touchdowns, which, again, defensive return touchdowns, interceptions for TDs, pick sixes, strip sack sixes, those kinds of things. They're nice, and there are teams that are better at it, but they still were a little unsustainably high this past year. I think that was mostly, but honestly, it was just a lot of little things. They didn't really stand out in a bunch of categories that were like super lucky. I think it was just a lot of little luck adding up for the
You know what it
Indianapolis
is, Nick?
Colts.
It's Minshew magic.
That's right. Garner Minshew magic.
That's all it was.
Well, I will say what's interesting to me and sort of a theme that I've been that this has been leading us to is coaching. And if you look at the top teams from last year, Nick, I'm glad you went to the Colts. Steelers, Mike Tomlin, traditionally a coach who motivates his teams, wins in underdog situations, has never been under 500 in his career. Eagles, a team last year that a lot of folks thought Nick Sirianni was in over his head, especially because he was without his 2 coordinators offensively and defensively. One of those coordinators, Shane Steichen, went to the Colts. And so what I'm wondering is, are the luck rankings a good representation of coaching factor? Dennis Allen is at the bottom. His team outscored opponents by 66 points. The other teams that did that had significantly more wins and went into the playoffs. Shane Steichen, his team is underperforming in terms of points allowed and points scored, yet they were overachievers. Do coaches play a factor in putting their teams in position to be lucky or unlucky? Sean, I want to get your take on that first.
I think that's a great point, and that's certainly probably an underlying variable that's kind of hard to quantify. But if a team is constantly overachieving, what better reason than the coaching staff? So I do take that in account. And if you recall, I was more comfortable backing the Panthers and Falcons heading into the season because they replaced their coaching staffs with people that I think are there to kind of correct what the problems are. Whereas the Saints, they still have Dennis Allen, so that could still be an underlying factor. So that's something that Nick and we talk about throughout the season a lot, where we're aware of it. But again, Nick's done so much back testing on it that if you were to just blindly bet these, I don't know if he's gone over all the numbers yet, you'd be doing really good. So we certainly trust in these, but I think that is one thing that we're always kind of cognizant of is, yes, some of these teams that are really unlucky could be due to bad coaching, and the lucky teams, good coaching. It's just hard to really quantify, but that is something that we're always, aware of.
Well, I do want to get to the ATS record for luck rankings, and luck rankings last year was really revelatory when it came to totals, over unders. The one more thing I'll say about coaching is the Packers were minus 1% in terms of luck. The Rams -2%. The Ravens -2%. The Chiefs and the Niners were both bottom 10. These are all playoff teams that have some of the best coaches in the NFL that overcame bad luck to put themselves in positions to go all the way to the Super Bowl in the case of the Chiefs and the Niners and then win the Super Bowl. That to me says a lot about how good Matt LaFleur, Sean McVay, John Harbaugh, Andy Reid, and Kyle Shanahan are as coaches. Those continue to be safe bets to me.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you plot, over the last, let's say 6 years of the luck rankings, times teams end up in the top quarter or top third or top 2 or 3, we would expect one team to have made the top 3 of the luck rankings in something like 4 or 5 out of the 6 years. And there's one team that has done it, and it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. And of course, that's Mike Tomlin. Now, is that coaching? I don't know, because that's exactly the number of teams we'd expect. Is it just randomly Mike Tomlin, or is it the one team because it's Mike Tomlin? And then we do the same thing for unlucky teams, and we see there's one team that's done it 4 out of the 6 years in terms of being really unlucky. So the distribution almost fits perfectly to where you'd expect these things by random chance, but it still feels like there is a coaching element that comes into play. I also think there's a little bit of a quarterback play style that comes into play. We look at some of the unlucky teams, Atlanta Falcons, Desmond Ridder, Chicago Bears, Justin Fields. They're really good with their legs, but they aren't necessarily as good throwing the ball. And they were really unlucky teams. Then we look at the really lucky teams, a lot more pocket passing type quarterbacks. We've seen Kirk Cousins in the past, all the Steelers, different quarterbacks they had last year. Baker Mayfield was 4th in Gardner Minshew. Obviously, the Eagles could be a little bit of an exception in terms
Hurts
of
was hurt. He wasn't really running
play.
as much the second half of the year, so I
Exactly.
agree with you on that.
So there could be a little bit of quarterback archetype in there as well, in terms of lucky versus unlucky, a little bit of coaching, but it's hard to tease all that out. So I mostly just ignore who the coach is, who the quarterback is, because over a long enough time period, the distributions have played out to fall into exactly the ways we'd expect them.
Give us the thresholds. What are the percentages at which you cover against the spread based on the luck percentage?
Yeah. So we'll just real quick. So in our luck rankings, we rank them 1 to 32. And if there's at least a 24 place difference in that ordinal luck ranking, we can say the unlucky team is a team we might back to cover the spread. Or if the luck percentage number that we have, the difference between those two teams is at least 50%. Again, we can back the unlucky team here. And last year, those sides went 60% against the spread, 14, 9, and 2. And for totals, we have 3 different factors we can look at. If a luck total, and we haven't really talked about luck totals, right? We've only talked about backing unlucky teams or lucky teams. But if teams are scoring more or allowing more points than expected, we would expect that to regress, and vice versa. If teams are not scoring enough or having really lucky defensive stands or things like that, we'd expect them to regress towards more higher scoring games. So we can bet on totals using the luck rankings. And we have 3 luck total thresholds. A luck total above positive 10 after week 3, a luck total above positive 5 after week 11, or a luck total below -5 anytime after week 3. So 3 different criteria. And luck totals last year went 35, 19, and 1 in the direction of which we'd expect, which is 64.5%. So overall, prior to week 18, 49, 28, and 3 on our luck-based bets, which just clears 63%. And every year we've had the luck rankings, even just back testing, the luck rankings have had positive years in all but one, and the other one was a barely losing year. And that's what we'd expect. We're not going to just blindly betting the luck rankings isn't always going to win. You're going to have years that where unlucky teams stay unlucky and lucky teams stay lucky and things like that. But overall, the luck rankings have a very positive record, over 60%, both on backing sides and on on totals.
Yeah, it's a genius stat. And the beauty of everything you've just said is if you go to Action Network, and these things really start to kick into gear once we've got about a month of the season under our belt. So as we get into the season, you want to be going to Action Network, checking it out in the app, checking it out on the web, and finding the luck rankings. I think we normally post them Wednesday and Thursday, right?
Yeah, we usually have them up Tuesday, right after
Tuesday.
Monday Night Football's done, and then I have them ready to go on Tuesday. But honestly, the luck rankings for betting sides kicks into gear right away. Week 2, we're ready to go. Weeks 2, 3, and 4 have some very high win rates against the spread, and that also is when the most number of games occur in terms of the season. And the luck rankings are a little unlucky last year in that we had fewer games to bet on in terms of unlucky teams than we normally would have in a given year. So hopefully we get a lot more unlucky versus lucky matchups early in the season this year than we had last year.
How can we use luck rankings to help us with win totals? Kerner, you talked a little bit about that earlier in the show.
Yeah. So I usually have my win totals guide sometime in August, but I definitely leverage these along with some of the other factors I mentioned, like injury luck, like strength of schedule, jump or drop in strength of schedule, things like that. So I leverage these or coaching changes, like I just said. I'm kind of with you where I think the coaching changes can certainly help correct a lot of these things that the teams were unlucky in. So I'm factoring all that in when I'm kind of creating my power ratings. But this is a huge, huge part of that, and I kind of talk about that through each team. But again, that'll be sometime in August. But I set all these up in my season sim to get, divisional odds, things like that. The last undefeated team, that 49ers bet I had last year, fun markets like that. A lot of that is kind of fueled by this data that we have from last season.
I was gonna give Sean a little bit more props too. Do you and Chris start up the fantasy show this next week, or is it already begun? Because last year
It
or the
is.
year before, our guy Sean here was the #1 ranker in all of fantasy football. #1, our guy here, Sean.
You're embarrassing me now. Me and Nick don't like to be embarrassed.
Well,
And the Fantasy Flex is now underway as of
Let's
yesterday.
go.
We're back, baby.
Go listen to the Fantasy Flex with Raybon and Kerner. I believe last year, the independent third-party ranking service Fantasy Pros called Sean Kerner, who has now been #1, I think 3 or 4 times.
The GOAT.
The GOAT.
Four.
The GOAT. What was it, Sean?
Yeah, 4 times. 4 times.
4 times.
Sorry, 4.
Let's go.
By the way, Nick would never correct me. He'd be like, I don't even want to talk about it.
Sean's a legend. I mean,
Sean
you go
knows.
back and listen. Sean was all over Puka. I mean, there's just a bunch of times where like you've saved my ass.
I think it
especially-
was something like the first year ever where Sean was top 10 in every position as well.
Yeah.
So
Even kicker,
is the
they don't
GOAT.
count kicker and defense, but I take those very seriously. So I was top 10 in those as well.
Also, by the way, for everybody who has watched Convince Me or should watch Convince Me, our Sunday morning preview show that both Simon and Sean are on, everybody knows Sean knows more about referee stats and how they can impact totals
Yes.
than
Or-
anybody in the handicapping business.
Or stat keepers when it comes to like dishing out tackles, things like that.
So true. Oh my God. I had a Max Crosby over 7 tackles prop last year only based on what you said. And I think he got it in the first half.
That was a fun one. Yeah, I forgot the game. He tackled like it wasn't even a sack. He just tackled the quarterback in the backfield or something. Those are always fun. Look for more of those this year. I'm going to refine that model.
Look for it all. Follow Sean Kerner in the Action Network app. Follow Nick Giffen in the Action Network app. You can listen to them on various shows. They're both on Green Dot Daily, Fantasy Flex, like Simon just mentioned, everywhere, all over the Action
What happens live?
Network. Bet What Happens Live. Absolutely. My favorite show in the Action Network universe, starring Dr. Nick Giffen. As a reminder, the Favorites podcast is presented by Bet365. Bet365 doesn't do ordinary. That's why you get more boosts with them than with anyone else. Every day they power up the odds on hundreds of bets to give you a chance to win more. Bet365 boosts specific markets, your winnings, and even parlays. And they don't stop there. Keep an eye for the biggest and best odds with the incredible Super Boost. Check out the boost and see why it's never ordinary at Bet365. Must be 21 or older. Present in Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Iowa, Louisiana, North Carolina, New Jersey, Ohio, Virginia, or 18 and older in Kentucky. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. Terms, conditions, restrictions apply. Simon and I will return with our next episode of The Favorites on the Action Network YouTube page Tuesday, 1:45 p.m. Eastern, with our first division preview. Download us from Spotify, Apple Pods, wherever you get your pods. Rate, review, subscribe, leave us 5 stars, say whatever you want. Feedback is a gift. Until next time, love you.